Hello.
Our story begins with the communication, a race against time and against revenge. General Skywalker and his master Obi-Wan Kenobi were out following the betrayal of Asajj Ventress. Where she went, neither of them knew, but they did know that she had been turned against. Her own instructor, Count Dooku, had been ordered to have her killed. Anakin, who was a witness to this, suggested to Obi-Wan that they act immediately. Kenobi was unsure of what his student was suggesting, but Anakin laid everything out quickly. There was a power vacuum in the Sith ranks. Count Dooku would surely be looking for a replacement. Both of them had assumed Asajj had failed too many times, not that the Sith Lord was trying to get Dooku to prove loyalty. Under this assumption, they believed that they could utilize a Jedi to become a turncoat and take advantage of the hole in the Sith. They'd need another assassin, and Anakin had the right Jedi in mind. Obi-Wan listened inquisitively, as Skywalker suggested that Pong Krell be positioned for this mission. Kenobi didn't quite understand why, but as Anakin explained, it would alleviate some unnecessary tension within their ranks. Pong Krell was a powerful warrior and a Jedi Master. He could offer experience and expertise to Dooku, something that was lacking with Ventress. In addition to this, they could utilize the absence of Krell to bring more clones back into alignment with the Jedi Order. Anakin rattled off some statistics about Krell's record as a Jedi General. He knew that the Council wouldn't do anything about it, but Anakin knew for a fact that his own clones weren't pleased with Krell's output. This was a private conversation between Skywalker and Rex. Despite this, Anakin respected Krell's reputation and believed it could be a great move for the Council, though he had one instant fear, which is how it could affect how the people of the galaxy saw the Jedi. If someone like Pong was seen joining the Sith or the CIS, then it could make their PR situation worse, which no one wanted. Kenobi had heard enough though. It was a sound idea, and he believed that if any Jedi were to be willing to take the shot, it would be Krell. Before they began the next leg of their own mission, Obi-Wan would relay all this back to the High Council. Luckily for them, Pong was already on planet with them. Following the transmission from Kenobi, the Council focused on the topic. They couldn't believe that Asajj had been betrayed, but Skywalker had a point. Dooku would be looking for a new assassin. Master Ki-Adi-Mundi suggested that it wasn't failure that plagued Asajj, but loyalty. Mundi feared that by sending Krell to Sereno, they could be damning him to death, which he didn't believe was a responsible move on their part, though there was reassurance from the Grand Master, who believed that they needed to pass the idea to Pong himself. He might have a more vibrant or hopeful feeling about this mission. They spoke into the conversation, because they needed to have some sense of direction for Krell. If he went in there, he could be a spy, he could be an assassin, he could be a multitude of things. But most of all, his entire life would be tested by Dooku. The Council might be sending Krell to the Count of Sereno, but he might not return a Jedi. Despite their own grievances with Dooku's betrayal, he was intelligent, and he had joined the Sith. If they were going to successfully complete this mission, they needed to know their plan of attack, and if their peer would be capable of completing it. After a few hours or so, Krell would be brought before the body of the Council, excluding Kenobi due to his current position. They informed the Jedi Master that they had a mission for him, explaining that he was to join the Sith and work undercover as an aide to them into the end of the war. If he could successfully do that, then perhaps they could undermine the plan of the Sith. Krell noted that this wasn't exactly a Jedi thing to do, prompting the Council to suggest that it was Skywalker's idea. That more than anything encouraged Pong to take this mission. He believed that if Anakin came up with it, then there was some sort of chance for it to work. The Council hadn't exactly proven themselves throughout this war, and Anakin had impressed him greatly. As a note, this took place before Krell ever had his vision of the end of the war, so he didn't have a reason to betray the Jedi. He loathed the clones, and he felt that being away from them was a good chance for him to reconnect with himself on a deeper level. The Council did express their concerns for his safety, because realistically, this mission could completely transform his life. Pong understood, and he too feared what he might have to do to prove his loyalty, but he was willing to do it for the sake of the Force, the Jedi, and the Republic. These were ideals he stood for, and he would serve the will of the Council. He bowed, asking them when he would leave. The Council gave him a time, and he abided by their commands. The following 24 hours would be a whiplash for Pong. While on Dathomir, Asajj was crafting up her revenge plan, the Jedi Master was preparing to shred himself for the sake of the galaxy. This could be the ultimate sacrifice, something that all Jedi promised to take part in if it came to be. Krell departed to Sereno, where he would arrive under the cover of darkness. He'd be apprehended by a number of Magna Guards, who tracked his Jedi starship. Before being brought to Dooku, they would investigate the ship to ensure that it was safe, and as it turned out, there was no tracker, it was disabled. Krell would be brought before Tyrannus, who was risen from his slumber. Instead of seeing a would-be assassin, he found a Jedi Master ready to kneel, and he did. It was weird because Dooku had known Krell from before his fall from grace. The prided Basilic would never do such things. He was a prideful man, someone who didn't fear any, and showed remorse only because he was a Jedi. Dooku asked Krell why he came to Sereno, and the Jedi Master grinned sadistically, saying that he found out that his little witch had been killed in battle, nearly ending the lives of Master Kenobi and Skywalker, according to rumor. Pong tapped his massive fingers against the soft marble-like floors of the palace, and told Dooku that he wished to serve him, to become his Sith apprentice, so that they could win this war. Tyrannus asked Krell what led him to this decision, and Pong rambled off many of the things he had heard Dooku say in his past. His former friend was always a big talker, and Pong typically listened, so he adjusted a couple things to make them sound more modern to the current era, and he spoke from his mind before his heart. When Krell adjusted to talking about his heart, he would mention the very important fact about himself that no one knew. Pong told the Count that he hated the clones. He loathed them with all of his heart. This fascinated Dooku, because every Jedi typically went out of their way to protect their clones. Asajj, Grievous, and even some other separatists confirmed this, just by noting simple actions made by the Jedi. Krell expressed his distaste in a great array of passionate burns against the test tube creations. This transitioned into his own heart-filled disappointment with the Jedi Council for employing such a force. Dooku could see the bubbling darkness and realized that whether this be a trick or an actually intentional mission, it would result all in the same outcome. Krell would join the dark side and become his apprentice. Tyrannus suggested that Krell get some rest, because they could start their training in the following day. They had much more to discuss anyhow. But before they left, Dooku held out his hand and requested the saber staffs that Krell used, and they were handed over without issue. When the morning came, after Pong spent all night being watched by Magna Guards, Dooku would have a much more direct approach to this monstrosity trying to join his side. He didn't actually fully doubt that Pong was here for pure intentions. Like, Dooku saw this as a realistic look into how Krell actually felt about the Jedi. There wasn't really any reason to think anything lesser of him, because this was a very real choice that was possible. The Council had disappointed many Jedi, and Dooku knew before the Clone War. But this was a different animal, and now with the war taking over the galaxy and the Council looking helpless, it was only a matter of time until someone found their way to Sereno. Krell waited for the perfect time because this would have never flown when Dooku still had Asajj. Tyrannus had a true connection with his former student, and he would need one with his current one. Their day started with a long discussion, one very similar to the one from the previous night. Dooku believed that Pong wouldn't have enough time to create and remember his ideals in the span it took for him to get to Sereno, after Ventress's defeat obviously. Luckily for Pong, he had a bunch of issues with the Jedi prior to leaving Coruscant. Most of them just weren't really externalized, because he could live with them. Unlike Dooku, Pong was strong-willed and determined to see things get better, not run away and act like they'd magically get better by going against it. Tyrannus' path in Pong's mind went completely against the Jedi way, and it only hurt the change that Dooku wanted to see. Again, without having a life-changing vision about the end of the war, Krell was only interested in the simplicities, such as completing his mission. But he still had no issue rattling off his problems with the Jedi and his hate for the clone army. The most abundantly clear thing to Tyrannus was that Krell was the real deal. He was an experienced warrior who just needed some training within the dark side. As a means to pass the trials quicker, Pong confirmed that he had killed his latest clone commander. The man was a burden on him, and when no one was looking, he covered his head with a pillow. The thing is, Dooku couldn't confirm if this was true or not. The clone commander for Krell's own division was badly wounded on the most recent battlefront. He died within a Republic medical bay, but the death was entirely of mortal wounds, not because of Pong. This, though, in a way confirmed what Dooku needed to know about his new ally. He was able to kill off the clones, and he was a threat to the Jedi Order, a true contender for a potential new apprentice. Before Dooku could make a decision, though, he was offered another apprentice from Mother Talzin. Tyrannus was well aware that she had provided Palpatine with Maul long ago, and he knew that Zabraks were powerful warriors, so he considered it. But instead of just giving the role of apprentice to either Savage or Krell, he would force them to fight to the death in a physical fight. Neither of them could use the Force, and they weren't allowed lightsabers. The only weapons provided for the physical fight were daggers, axes, pikes, and spears. Mother Talzin would be informed of this when she arrived. She believed it'd be a good case study for whether or not her own boy could dominate a fight against someone like Krell. At midday, the Basilic and Zabrak would stand before each other in the courtyard of Castle Sereno. They were given the clear ground rules of no use of the Force and only the weapons presented before them, and they were fine with this. Krell and Savage lined up on opposite sides of the courtyard, and they were given a countdown. Watching down over them, beside Dooku, was Mother Talzin and a couple of her Night Sisters. They were hoping that Savage could help their sister Asajj complete her revenge, but the former Jedi would surely be a challenge. When the time clicked down to 0, a gong sounded, alerting the two combatants that the fight had begun. They rushed towards each other, both using incredible speed. Savage went straight for the largest pike he could find, but instead of watching his opponent grab a weapon, he ran past Savage. The towering Zabrak turned around confusedly, expecting a duel to commence, but it never came. Then he was kicked in the face by Pong's massive foot. He tumbled backwards and Krell readied himself, spreading his forearms out into 4 different directions. Dooku rubbed his beard, curious as to why this prospect didn't choose a weapon initially. All to be revealed. Savage used the pike and rushed Krell, jabbing at him several times as the fallen Jedi pushed each strike away from him, before getting a hold of the pike and tossing it away from the two of them. Savage knew that his horns had been extended in the magic used by Talzin, and he rushed Pong, and lowered his head as he got closer. The Basilic sucked in his gut, and planted his hands on Savage's shoulders, before kneeing him in the face a dozen or so times, before throwing the Zabrak across the ground. He rose to his feet and wiped blood from his chin, before getting clobbered again. The two towering monsters swung into each other. 4 punches versus 2, and Pong knew his breaking limit. Savage had only just begun. Their fight only got more and more intense as Krell stole the advantage again and threw Savage to the ground. The former Jedi moved to the middle of the arena to grab his weapon, before whipping back around with his third arm and gripping a thrown pike. Savage's jaw dropped as he looked up to Mother Talzin, as if she might help him here. Krell called the Zabrak a dishonor to his people, trying to kill an opponent while he wasn't looking. Pong picked up a dagger or 2, or maybe 3, and lobbed all of them at Savage, who planted his hand before his face and ate all 3 direct shots across his forearm. When he reeled in pain, he looked up to see Krell lunging forward and stabbing the pike he threw right into his own stomach. Savage gripped the weapon, trying to stop it, but Krell overpowered him, shoving it deeper and deeper, before ripping a dagger out of the Zabrak's arm and slitting his throat. He cut off Savage's head and held it up before Dooku, demanding to know if he was or was not entertained. Tyrannus grinned and clapped before leaning over to Talzin and wishing her safe travels to her home. Dathomir might one day have a servant worthy of joining the Sith. She didn't care all too much, but she bowed and left the planet, so that Tyrannus and his new student might work together. Dooku believed this test was a fine example of Krell's turn towards darkness. While what Pong did wasn't explicitly dark, it came off like it was, because he executed Savage, something that no Jedi would do, let alone removing his head and hoisting it up like a trophy. Simply speaking, a Jedi wouldn't ever do something so egregious, but an assassin would be very capable of making those choices, showing off as such, and killing unlike any Jedi would. Though Dooku needed more proof, and he would get it, by forcing his new potential dark apprentice to train in the dark side. This show of strength against Savage was cool, and it was very entertaining, but he was lacking something. The dark side needed to be imbued within him, so their training would immediately force Krell to slip further into darkness. And the best part is, it worked. This would start with the raising of pillars to display strength before his new instructor. The darkness was very easy for Krell to manipulate, and he adjusted to it very comfortably. Dooku's training was almost seamless, and not for nothing, Pong reminded him of himself. This was an individual hell-bent on bringing the Jedi down and reshaping the Republic. They would get along just fine. On Dathomir, away from the drama of the new Sith ranks, the witches were sending Asajj on another mission. Sadly, Savage was not the threat needed to take down the Sith, so they needed another. Luckily, there was a third brother, one taken from the clan when he was but a child. Maul was his name, and he still lived. Talzin sent Asajj to find the Night Brother and return him to their cave, so that he could be used against the Sith and destroy Count Dooku. Despite what everyone thought of Asajj, Talzin wanted revenge too. That was her boy who died on Serenno, and Dooku would pay for having pinned Krell against Savage. Tyrannus moved on so quickly from Asajj. The plague of the Sith should pay for their actions. The next several weeks would have Krell bleeding his kyber crystals and transforming himself into a true assassin. The hulking warrior was a force to be reckoned with, but there was something missing from him still. By removing the light, he was removing his chance to see clearly. The Force works in mysterious ways, but very infrequently does it reward the wretched. Those without cleansed hearts steal to gift themselves what they cannot have, because the Force would never gift them such things. In this, Pong, whose heart had actually fallen into darkness, would not see the fate of the Clone War. It was clouded, unclear, and uncertain. Now he did have a vision, but it was about his death at the hands of Dooku. Though he was receiving true Sith training, which was the selfishness that drove their order. Krell, who initially came to Serenno with pure intentions, had become the anti-Jedi. He wasn't quite a Sith, just the antithesis of everything he had worked so hard to be ever since becoming a Jedi. But his proof of loyalty had not been confirmed yet. Master Krell would be sent from Serenno to the planet of Deveron at the Temple of Edith. A small detachment of clones served Master Halsey and Padawan Nox. These two Jedi weren't aware of what was coming for them. Instead of an all-out assault, Krell landed under the cover of his Jedi shuttle and entered the temple without raising a concern. As Master Halsey talked to him about why he came here, his stomach was punctured by a single blade from Krell's staff. The weapon spun around, igniting the backside and removing the head of the Padawan. The clones in the room chirped out panicked orders, but they, within minutes, would be killed by his blades. None of them stood a chance anyways, so it was a very enjoyable slaughter for the new assassin. The record of his massacre would also be removed. Pong pridefully abandoned the planet, leaving not a trace, but the death he brought. The Jedi investigation into it would not reveal who the perpetrator was either. When Krell returned to Serenno, he would have his first meeting with Darth Sidious. Initially, this little project was meant to be kept a secret from the Sith Lord, but Tyrannus should have known better. Palpatine knew everything. Sidious had no problem acquiring information on this little apprentice of his. Though Pong had more to offer being a former Jedi than the old witch assassin did. As was discussed, they wanted Pong to infiltrate the Jedi Order, returning with false information. No one knew that Krell was here for his own mission, but Palpatine wanted Pong to work as a double agent, return to the clone lines and continue slaughtering them. They could use him as the perfect case in point for the Jedi's lack of care in the Grand Army of the Republic. It would work two ways in Palpatine's mind, the first of which dehumanizing the clones, and the second being the public's disconnect from the Jedi Order. Whichever came first, it didn't matter. The end result being the same is what Palpatine wanted. So in essence, Krell would act as a triple agent or something, which he wasn't even sure if he could handle, because at this point nothing made sense to him. He was serving the Separatists, he was leaning into the dark side, but was he really a Darksider? He didn't really know. Everything was just a jumbled mess in his mind, and the following few days wouldn't help that. Truthfully, meeting Palpatine in person left a scar in Krell's mind. The man embodied evil, and his presence was terrifying. He was a short figure though. His low voice reminded Pong of someone else, but he wasn't sure who. Krell was struggling though. The dark side was seeping deeper into his veins. He hoped to return to the temple so that the council could coax him out of it, but not even he knew if he could handle that. Part of him imagined plunging his saber into Yoda's heart, or beheading that cone-headed Mundi, or slaughtering Kenobi and his duplicitous apprentice. But then he would remember that he loved them as much as any Jedi was allowed to. He cared about his peers, instructors, and students around him. The Order was his home. Betraying it for the feeling of something lesser wasn't his idea of a good time. Before Krell could fully master his feelings and return to the temple at Coruscant with the false information Sidious bestowed him, Serenno was attacked. This wasn't a clone attack. This was revenge in the middle of one night, coming from the individuals who had every reason to hate Dooku. For Maul, he had been replaced by Tyrannus. For Asajj, she had been betrayed by him. They were two Dathomiri warriors back for revenge against one man, named Sidious, but first they'd start with Tyrannus. Their weapons ignited in the middle of the night, forcing the sentries to fight them. The Magna Guards did their job, which was alerting the two Sith. Krell and his master rose for the fight, and they rushed out to see swirling crimson blades. Each of the sentries were cut down reasonably quick, as the two Dathomiri scum made their appropriate attacks, both aimed at Tyrannus. Dooku, wearing his custom velvet Sith pajamas and his leathery, officially trademarked Sith slippers, readied himself. His curved hilt found his hand and ignited into a fiery array of combat. Pong watched it, knowing for the first time that he hadn't lost himself, because part of him wanted to kill the three of them. But he couldn't let that happen. He needed to learn about Sidious. He rushed forward and attacked the two, trying to save Tyrannus. Asajj would be the first to counter his towering crimson pillars of light. Their weapons crashed together as the echoes of sabers bounced off the walls. This was a fight between Darksiders, and despite one being a Jedi, he didn't consider himself one for a moment during this duel. Pong's aggressiveness was matched by the quick and flexible moves made by Ventress. She was truly Tyrannus' student, and she was fiercer than anything Krell had seen in a long time. Their weapons glided across the others, as Pong eyed his ally on the other side of the room. Maul was an incredible warrior, made better by simply being arrogant and losing to Kenobi. He'd spent more than a decade thinking about that mistake, prepared to make up for it here on Sereno. Their sabers collided. Maul attempted to use his metallic boots to crush Dooku's feet, but Sith slippers were not for the wretched, like the scum of the galaxy named Maul. He had to be cool enough to earn them, and he certainly wasn't. Dooku had vengeance on his mind too. He still held the belief that Qui-Gon would have joined him if he survived. Whether it was a true belief or something to help him sleep at night, he didn't know. But he wanted Maul dead more than anyone in the galaxy. Their sabers drove towards the other's body, but were redirected by precision moves. Each separate duel continued about inside the castle, without anyone gaining any footing. Dooku was looking for a slow and painful death for Maul, while Pong was trying to see what Dooku did. Their weapons flashed away, creating more bouncing echoes, before sounding off with the collision of Asajj against a wall, after Krell launched her. As he rushed in to save Dooku, the Zabrak warrior countered by clobbering Pong's shin with a metal boot, crushing the bone into splinters. Krell wheezed and fell backwards, slipping out of his grip on the darkness, defending each strike that came from him as a Jedi would. Dooku didn't catch this as he launched electricity into Maul's back. It was stopped by Asajj, who came to aid her Dathomiri brother. Maul kicked Pong in the face and completely neutralized him. The sound of sabers would wake him from an unconscious state, not more than a few minutes after. The duel had only intensified, and Dooku didn't give up a single inch. He was an impossible foe. Krell used the dark side to rise to his feet. His sabers didn't ignite and he rushed forward, putting all available pressure onto his broken shin, and at the last possible second ignited his lightsabers. The two opponents were not protected. Maul was immediately impaled as he lost his legs again in the second sweep, before dying. Pong continued spinning through, cutting Ventress in half, making her end less suffering, and delivering a painfully shocking strike to Tyrannus. Dooku looked up in shock, and Krell even paused for a moment before stepping back. He looked down at the bodies, seeing that he had killed Ventress, Maul, and now Dooku. Palpatine's apprentice held his stomach, and Pong watched life fade from his former friend's eyes. He grabbed a hold of Dooku and held him until he hit the ground. He couldn't believe what he had done. It was never meant to come to this, and Pong didn't even mean for this to happen. He secretly hoped that he could have saved Dooku from the dark side and all of his war crimes, but no, that wasn't a possibility as it turns out. The light faded from Dooku's eyes in the following few minutes, and his skin ran cold. Pong yelled in rage, unleashing an aspect of the dark side that he had not known or felt in his life. It shattered the windows in the room and put cracks along pillars. As he finished, he heard laughing. Sidious clapped slowly in a cliché villain way, and Pong looked up from his friend's dead body. He demanded to know what had happened here. Sidious smiled and told Krell that he had found himself a new apprentice, one far stronger, far younger, and more adequate to serving the needs of the Sith for a longer time. Sidious walked along the outer edge of the catwalk, above the hall inside the castle, and asked Pong if he really thought he could handle the Sith path. Krell bowed his head and pledged to the Sith Lord that he could. A reality slipped into his head, a promise of a new life, one of infinite power, and all of a sudden, the hope of a future that could be with the Jedi disappeared. Pong could be on the winning side. Sidious's small frame hovered down from the catwalk, gracefully like an angel of death. His cold and firm hand found Krell's shoulder, as he told the Sith Apprentice that he had much to learn, but in time, he would come to know him as Master. Pong nodded his head respectfully, referring to the Sith Lord as the one and only Master he wished to have and serve in his life. Krell's confusion had found completion. He had found an answer, and he gave his honor to the Sith, telling Sidious that he would bound himself to his ways. Sidious grinned, informing Krell that they would see. Palpatine, by the way, absolutely knew that Krell didn't kill Tyrannus by accident. He understood, but he also knew that Krell killing Tyrannus would be the pushing that Krell needed to become a Sith. As per his new master's instructions, Krell would return to the temple with false information, leading 3 of the largest divisions of clones into a deadly trap. Of course, Pong informed the Jedi that he had replaced Dooku by killing him on accident. He gave the Jedi Council a clear look into what he was opening up. Sidious was none the wiser, but it didn't matter, because Krell wasn't betraying his new master anymore. His motivations were in loyalty to the Sith path, which he followed precisely. The Jedi expected nothing but pure intel from Krell, as he sent 3 Jedi Masters to their deaths, and with them, their clone legions. Sidious wanted to turn Skywalker to the dark side earlier in the war than he initially planned on. The attack that was to come would need weeks of preparation, per Krell's intel, so the Jedi, CIS, and Sith did everything they needed to, so that they could obliterate each other. It took longer than anyone wanted, but after giving Skywalker some time back on Coruscant before the battle, the 501st led the charge, with the 212th and 187th backing them up. This attack was meant to trap General Grievous and Admiral Trench in one go, a strike that would sweep the Separatists off their feet. When the battle came, though, the Republic was led further and further into a trap that would devastate them. Mines demolished starships, and on the surface, explosions sent clones flying. The 4 Jedi, Windu, Kenobi, Skywalker, and Tano, rushed for cover. Obi-Wan went looking for Anakin. When he watched his former student get Ahsoka to safety, he was blown off his feet. Like Maul, he was left without any legs, and watched as more explosions sent clones into the air. In space above the system, General Grievous and Pong Krell arrived. They were here to see the destruction of these 3 major fleets, hoping to cripple Republic morale. Sidious was using this moment to turn the clones against the Jedi, and the people against the Jedi. It would work too. Krell was inside of a shuttle, heading for Grievous' flagship from the Jedi Temple, because he was going back to Sereno to continue up the ruse with Sidious. This would be the first time that Grievous and Krell would meet. On the surface, battle droids executed clones unable to fight for themselves. It was a total mess, and Skywalker, making sure that Ahsoka was alright, got her to a shuttle for evac. Anakin found Master Windu first. He had been killed protecting a bundle of clones, who were also dead. As Anakin rushed for Kenobi, another explosion went off in front of him. It badly burnt him and sent him tumbling across the rough terrain. When he looked up, Rex and Cody were killed in a bundle of blasts. The droids were tearing through the arena set up for the Republic. Ahsoka was pulled into a gunship by retreating clones that saw what they thought to be a dead Anakin Skywalker. The Chosen One's last sights would be on Ahsoka vanishing into the sky to retreat with the survivors of this horrendous attack. Anakin would be taken as prisoner up to the flagship, where another confrontation was taking place. Grievous and Krell hadn't ever really been on good terms. They interacted once over hologram, but this was their first in-person interaction, and Grievous believed the fallen Jedi was meant to be his own replacement. With Tyrannus out of the way, Grievous expected to become the next leader of the CIS, but no, another fallen Jedi got to have all the accolades, and that pissed him off, more than anything else in the galaxy. Now, face to face, without anyone to buffer them, Grievous started threatening Pong, being that he believed he was the more important warrior. Anakin was brought in and tossed unconsciously on the ground, as they continued to bicker at each other. He was the prize. With 2 counselors dead, the hope that the council would continue choking itself down the wrong path was well alive, and Anakin might be pulled towards darkness by Krell. Since he was knocked out though, Krell had been informing Grievous that he was leagues more important because he had information. In a boasting way, an arrogant way, he told Grievous about everything he knew. Anakin would awake during this part and catch a couple important things before Grievous ignited his sabers and attacked Krell. Skywalker's vision kept going bright and dark before he finally realized where he was and what was happening. These fools were going to destroy themselves over nothing. 4 sabers from each opponent colliding, and Krell, tired of the constant back and forth of clashing of sabers, used the Force to completely crush Grievous. The droid general would be dead within minutes, and no longer a threat. surely something that wouldn't please his new master. But chances are, Sidious would shift control over the droid army back to Krell. As Pong was preparing to contact the future Emperor, he could hear the sound of a lightsaber igniting. Anakin broke out of his cuffs and was standing opposite end of the bridge from Pong. He could finally see the damage done, and the Republic fleet was in shambles. Anakin pulled another Jedi weapon from Grievous's dead body and ignited it. Pong grinned, knowing that he would enjoy killing the Chosen One. The two of them rushed in towards each other, their blades colliding in midair. Krell was an absolute power to be reckoned with, and Anakin was weak from being bombed on the surface. His eyes were heavy, and burn marks still scarred his face. They dragged their sabers into each other's. Krell's heavier assaults pressed down on Anakin, overpowering the Chosen One. Skywalker slipped back, using some droids to buy himself some cover, before switching back to his dominant saber and leaping at the fallen Jedi. Their blades continued to bob around the command center, as Skywalker eventually lost his grip and received a firm blow through the abdomen, falling to his knees, in the process, being kicked over. Anakin wheezed in pain, feeling his own life force drained from his body. Krell turned around to address a super tactical droid, and Anakin, next to the main control console, got a brilliant idea. He didn't even know if this would work, but he would use some wires in the command console and plug them into his own personal transmission device as quickly as possible. He smirked, patching in a call to Ahsoka, who answered. She had been crying, and so her voice was quiet and broken. Anakin whispered to her to use Order 65 and get it to whoever was in highest command around her. They needed it. One of the many things Krell had learned since becoming Palpatine's new pet was the executive orders, but ironically he did not learn them from Palpatine. See, Pong knew the story of Kamino. The missing piece was whoever Tyrannus was, the name that Palpatine addressed to Dooku. Everything became clear at that point, and Pong decided to look into Kamino, using the pseudonym of Tyrannus. It revealed so much more. While most of what he said to Grievous was to assert dominance, he did know some truths, more than what Grievous knew. He just thought that Skywalker was incapacitated. Plus, Pong only found out that Skywalker was doing this at the current moment. He turned over when the super tactical droid caught Anakin speaking into a comlink. Pong ignited his staff again and raised it above his head. He wasn't supposed to kill Anakin, but this would do it. And at the last second, Anakin ripped his body around, and at the same time, Krell and Skywalker plunged their sabers into each other's chests. Pong fell backwards and died nearly instantaneously. But Anakin whispered his last words to Ahsoka, telling her to trust the Force. Skywalker's body, after his death, would disappear, with Qui-Gon's help and most importantly protection. Ahsoka, on the other hand, would find wounded Fives and Jesse. The two ARC troopers were beat up, and she asked them if they knew an Order 65. This drew absolutely no response from either of them, and she continued poking about, not getting any understanding until she slipped out Execute Order 65, which activated their inhibitor chips. Jesse, the lesser wounded clone, would stand up immediately, telling her that the Chancellor had committed an act of treason against the Republic. He hobbled away to relay the order. She was confused. While Anakin would never see it, his actions would bring forth the destruction of the Sith, and technically end the Clone War. By suggesting that Krell involve himself in a spy mission, all of this was able to transpire. Palpatine would be gunned down by dozens of clones after putting up a pretty hefty fight. It left the Republic in a state of confusion, because the clones kept repeating the same order, though the Senate found it to be a believable set of orders, without the Kaminoans informing anybody of what it was. If every clone thought it was true, then clearly they had seen something with Palpatine committing sedition or whatnot to confirm these suspicions. Had Dooku and Grievous survived Palpatine, they would have won the war, but the Separatist movement continued only for so long, until Admiral Trench was defeated by a combined team of Jedi Knight Ahsoka Tano and Master Plo Koon. They were among the last elite units in the galaxy, and called to duty. Defeating Trench would end the Separatist movement, because they'd been calling for peace after Dooku's death, and Grievous kept the engines churning. It would only be a matter of time until they fell flat. Ahsoka and Plo would stop the CIS Council, effectively ending the war for good. Though what couldn't be ignored were the sacrifices of those who made this outcome a reality. The Jedi never truly knew how evil Krell became. His endeavors started with purity, and slowly but surely the curse of Palpatine cut through his veins, turning him into a cold-blooded, power-obsessed monster. Anakin was the last Jedi to see that. He was also the Jedi to end it. Skywalker's call on Order 65 would save the Republic and the Jedi from Palpatine, but it would also provide something greater than any of that. Padme would have the twins, Luke and Leia, because of the short time Anakin had on Coruscant before the trap. While the twins would be raised without their father, they would at least have their biological mother, who had help from the Jedi. Yoda personally sent caretakers to Padme's home to help her, never forcing her to put the children into the Order. It was Padme's decision to make sure they remained free to choose their own lives, and Yoda respected it. The Sith were gone. The Clone Wars came to an end. The balance was restored to the Force, and the future preserved. It was a swift but painful change of fate that sent the galaxy back on track. It started and ended with the Chosen One, but it left those closest to him with the opportunity to enjoy their lives rather than endure in suffering. And that, my friends, is our story. And special thanks to all the patrons: Benjamin Wells, Ozpin, Angel Dust, Jack Silver, There Are Cars, The Shade of Fear, Prismatic Warlock Master, Lyndall Asher, Schmoobs, Darth Vitiate, Seju Jagger, Groot 36, Hunter Belden, Rosebird, General Alexander, Robin Roberts, Blackie Chan, Alexander Arisa Beginning and End, Django Fat Clone, Nick 5098, Ben Ingram, The Big Red Pyramark, Diamond Constant, Darth Nemesis, Lord Tibbs, CC2024, Galvin Gaming, Tristan, Mandalore, Sir Wellen 1767, Darth Revan, Granddaddy Bane, Laliant, Sky Guy, Penguin, Cullen Rooney, Shark Midori, RJ38, Nick, Michael Erlanger, The Last Jedi, Apollo, Weewoo 670, Annika Stank Runner, CT7567, Toaster Oven, Oz of Oz, Darth Knox, The Eternal Padawan, Joshua Tem, Jenny Naguin, Zanza Skeleton, Mr. Yeet Gamer, Lord Calig, Youngling Slayer 66, Mad Meta Studios, Anakin 003, Lord Draken, Fortis Legacy Star Wars, Airbus, Rex the Wolf, the main three first names, Dark Saint 46, Baron Joshua, and Lord Deadwing. Before supporting the channel, smash that like button. Let's talk about this story. So this story was meant to have tons of twists and turns. Anakin dying was not originally the idea I had going into this, but I thought it would fit the whole vibe, because in all fairness, this entire thing, like, the balance is brought to the Force because of him. He starts his mission before the Mortis arc, so in a way I kind of saw this as him kind of becoming one with the Mortis gods following this. I know I don't necessarily say it in the video, but my own headcanon for the story is that because this all happens before the Mortis arc, Anakin dies because he ends up being the one on Mortis. He ends up going to Mortis and becoming the father, essentially. So instead of him, living out his life, he's forced into the sacrifice that he doesn't make in canon. He avoids that sacrifice and becomes Vader. In this story, he's kind of forced into it because he made the decision to sacrifice his life, which results in a better life for everyone around him. As for Krell, I wanted his story to be kind of confusing. Him turning to the dark side felt like it was due to happen, but I kind of like the idea of him not even joining the dark side intentionally. He joins the dark side because he accidentally hits Dooku. He didn't mean to hit Dooku, and I didn't mean that. He didn't mean to do that. He just did it by accident. And so Pong turning to the dark side isn't what was meant to happen in this story. It happens as an accident, and that accident leads to the destruction of the Sith. But I hope you all enjoyed. I love you all, spread the love, and always remember, my friends, may the Force be with you.